Hey everybody, Craig Argent again here for our third instalment of our Sabre Education Live. We are today going to be working through a long haircut layer, a little bit of disconnect, a little bit of deconstruction, but at the end of the day we will have a really beautiful seamless end result. I think when it comes to in-salon haircuts, this is the haircut that we do all day, every day. This is our bread and butter. Are there 1,000 ways to do this haircut to achieve the same end result? Absolutely. You could talk to 10 different you could talk to 1,000 different hairdressers, and they're all going to tell you probably something slightly different. But are we going to end up in the same place? Usually. What we will work through though today, particularly with the technique, is to also highlight areas where hairdressers do get in trouble with long layers and working with longer haircuts. Taking too much weight, over-directing, under-directing, and so forth. So we are going to work through some of those areas. Completely 100% encourage anybody to ask questions as we're going through. This allows us to be able to answer questions that maybe somebody else in the group is thinking about. So completely 100% encourage that and look forward to that. Today, as you'll notice, this is Nina, our model. So what we're going to do with Nina is we're actually going to cut her hair dry. I think one of the main reasons why I'm going to do that, because we are carrying quite a bit of length and we want to maintain as much length as possible. We're also going to do some beautiful face framing layers as well. This is twofold for doing this. One of the main reasons as well that I wanted to do this dry, in the perfect sense, when you do haircut tutorials and so forth, you prep the hair 100%, so it is absolutely perfect on the day. I purposely didn't want to wash Nina's hair and prep it 100% how we normally would. I actually wanted to treat this a little bit like if a client walks in, they want to have a dry haircut done and don't have the time, or they're working to budget restrictions. It gave me the perfect opportunity to showcase one of the new products in the Joico range, which was the dry hair shampoo. One of my favourites. It's a great saver in the sense of allowing you to have day hair, the next day hair on day 1 or day 3 or day 4, depending. But I purposely wanted to spray that through, dry it through the hair to allow us to be able to, 1, show the product, 2, it gives nice weight without manipulating it too much. Yeah, it's one of my favourites. It's a big favourite in the salon. It's one of the ones we can't keep on shelf. So we'll get into the haircut. Now what we're going to do, there are numerous ways in which you can move through a haircut like this. There are times when people will actually create a baseline to start with, or a perimeter line. I'm actually going to do that last. So I'm actually going to work internally first. Once again, like I said, there's 100 different ways in which you can approach this haircut. This one I'm actually going to work from the interior, from the crown area, and work my way out. So there will be a couple of different techniques, as I said, as I'm working through here to maintain the seamless end result, as well as approaching the layers. When you are working with layers and length that is this long, theoretically you do have to go through with a bit of an increased layer to maintain as much physical weight as possible in the baseline, so you don't thin it out too much and then have to bring up your baseline or your perimeter line. Now, the tools of choice today. The key things that I'm going to be working with here today are my straight blades. These are the sharpest scissors that I actually have in my kit, 6.5 inches. I will have a regular blade, which is my daily, which I'll use on the baseline, or I might toss up and use my serrated on the baseline because we are cutting dry. I do use a smaller scissor when I'm doing that because I need to be a little bit more precise, and the serrated blade keeps the hair in play as opposed to pushing it away. I do have my texturizing scissors, which I may bring in. I'm not 100% sure if I will or not, depending on how we go through the haircut.
Okay, Craig, we just have a question quickly. Just could you go over again why you would choose to cut it dry versus wet?
Okay,
and that's from Pauline.
Perfect. Thank you, Pauline. Great question. The reason why we're going to cut it dry today, because of the fact that we want to maintain as much length as possible, this gives me the perfect opportunity to see how much hair I'm taking out. If we cut this wet, what we tend to find is we get a little bit trapped to the technique. This is going to be a little bit more visual, allowing us to be able to visually see that we are maintaining as much length as possible. And obviously too, when I do the seamless component of this, which is the internal part of the layer, which will be chipped, will actually allow us to see exactly where we're at, making sure that we don't thin this out too much. So if we actually look on the bottom of Nina's hair here, she is due for a haircut, and we can see how the baseline is thinning. If we were to go through and do this wet, what can happen when we get to the drying component is we just shift that see-through or transparent area up higher. So doing it dry is going to give us a better visual as we're moving through the technique and the different layering patterns. Great question.
Thanks, Craig. Great answer.
Cool. Okay, so key thing here when we're actually working this, we are going to be doing some face framing layers as well. So what we ultimately want to do here is actually get the front panels out of the way. As we're aware, we do have obviously less hair as we move across the top of the ear. So I will actually take this from back of fringe to back of ear and get this section out of the way. I'll repeat that on the other side. Now be generous with my fringe section, just for no other reason that I'm better off having a little bit of hair on my side than not. So what we'll work with here when we actually create this first section, which is going to create the guide for the internal part of the haircut and the internal part of the layering system that we're actually going to do here today, is we'll actually drop this off the back of the crown. So I'm actually working from the crest line, which is the widest part of the head. The easiest way to actually determine where your crest line is to hold the comb on the side of the head, and as it actually starts to separate away, that gives you the perfect gauge as to the widest point of the head and where your crest line will be.
Your comb is a ruler.
It is a ruler. So this then allows us to have pretty much a clear view of what we're leaving in our perimeter section. So this will be actually connected through with a second layering system, which I'll show you after the first. Now you can work two ways with this as far as getting the back section out of the way. You can just scoop that around the shoulder. If you want to, you can wind it up and put it into clips. The only thing you've got to be mindful of when you are cutting dry is that if by putting too many clips in or twisting it up too much, you can create clip marks. So I'm going to be a little bit more freehand today as we work through with that. Now this is Nina's bra, so I can't actually undo this in one layer, otherwise exposing more. No. So as we work with this, we're going to work with an inch thick section that will run from the back of the fringe area through to the top of the occipital bone. This will be a section that we will then elevate and actually cut through in an increase. We'll then move from one side to the other in relation to working up to the original guideline. Now be true to the sense of actually doing an inch thick section as opposed to a hairdresser's inch. Now I'm going to swap sides if I can, Anne, just because of the way we're going to work.
Just a little glary.
Now what you'll actually notice here is that we have a little bit of disconnection between the top and the existing layers that are actually running through that back area. So by actually working with this particular technique, we're going to connect or use the existing short pieces as a starting point.
We just have, Megan's just made a great suggestion of what she likes to do. She turns her cape
Around the other way.
Around the other way. Yeah.
You're getting getting a little ahead of us here, Megan. We will actually do that as well when we actually stand Nina up to actually cut the baseline. Love the tip though.
Oh, that's better. And also there's a little bit of Joico on the front of the cape, so we love that. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. But thanks for sharing your tape, Megan. That's awesome.
I know a few Megans, so I'm not sure if it's one that I know. I've got a feeling it could be.
And we also have lots of hellos as well.
Hey, how you going? So as we work through here, we actually work this out in a slide format. The key thing when you are cutting layers is that you have to be mobile. You have to be very aware of where your body position is, where your feet are positioned. It's not a haircut where you can just stay stationary behind the client. You need to move to be able to adjust and get yourself in the right position to be able to execute the layers properly. And a lot of that is just basically about consistency through, so you're actually repeating and getting the same effect from one side to the next. We all have a strong side and a weak side, depending on whether we're right-handed or left-handed.
So what's your tip there, Craig? When you're pulling that up and doing your technique, you're then just dropping the hair. So how do you keep your guide?
Okay, so basically what we're doing here, the guide is, it's just a little bit of a freehand section to the degree that we're actually working with the existing length that's on the crown area. So that's point A. Point B is working out until I literally run out of hair. So as we hold this up, I've got my start point. On the inside I do have a guide as to where the previous sections are. Because I'm actually combing everything back to the original guideline, so we have a stationary guideline going on here. So everything's getting pulled up to the top section. Primary and one of the main reasons for that, and I think we've all been in the situation where we've had people with long hair come in and they've been overlaid or they've been cut a little bit more with a mobile guideline and there's no weight in the sides, see-through, too much has been taken out. This just safeguards us from that happening, which allows us to be able to move a little bit easier through the face framing part of the haircut.
Okay, cool. And Pauline has asked another question. Would you say that this, what you're doing is slide cutting? Would you call that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
It's slide cutting as far as the execution of the technique.
Yep.
But what we'll actually find with that is that we're following the same patterns that we do when we're actually being a little bit more precise. Because we've got quite an exaggerated length here, it's important that we sort of follow that or borrow that technique or premise, but we are sliding through.
And you would do that over blunt cutting? Yes.
Absolutely. There's a big part of this is, and I can't say that this is just solely something that's applicable to where we live, but here in Queensland, particularly when you are carrying a lot of length in your hair, we're not so fixed into definite parts. Clientele is very mobile with their hands, moving the hair around and so forth. So a great question in the point in the scheme of things that will somebody wear their hair definitely in a particular side part? There's always that element of movement and shift, so you've got to be a little bit more universal. This is a personal preference for me, that I generally will always cut to a centre line, which makes us even all the way around. So the client can be mobile from one side to the other. If they're wearing the hair curly, if they're wearing the hair straight. So we've completed the first side. We'll now repeat on the second side. We'll keep cutting though, because of the technique, from this one side, because we are moving to the stationary guideline. The whole way along, we're able to comb the hair down, look at our sections, see how we're travelling in relation to the layers and how they're looking quite, shall we say, seamless. So the whole idea of a seamless layer and what that actually means is the sense that we're not seeing any hard lines as to where layers start and finish. If we were literally projecting the first section straight up, which in the early stages of when we're first taught to cut layers, we'll bring it straight up, create a guideline, we cut it blunt or we'll chip into it, then we bring everything up to that point. What can tend to happen in that situation is that you do see where that first layer starts and everything below that point. As we can see here, I'm still to connect this crown section into the base area, but you cannot see where a layer starts and or finishes. So,
Most definitely looking seamless, Craig.
absolutely, seamless is the key, seamless is the word. The key part, I think, when it comes to cutting layers or doing any haircuts really is being able to remain consistent.
So I could see there that you're not fully closing your blade as well, which is a really good sliding technique. Do you just want to explain that a little bit for everybody?
Primarily there, because of the fact that my scissors are so sharp, pretty much anything that gets in between those blades is coming off. So to slide with this properly, it's going to allow us to actually work our way through. So it's just working. I actually place my finger on the bolt and actually don't even have my thumb right in the blade. I literally just do little short, sharp movements, but I'm actually guiding it. So that can allow me to, if I want to, not going to cut the section, but it allows me to scoop through if I want to, and I can fully close the blade. A lot of the time I'll go in little short, sharp movements.
Yeah, you're torquing the scissors essentially, is what I used to call it.
And this will be our final section here. All the while we're coming back through and we're double checking, just making sure that we've still got all that length, still retaining that seamless result that we're after. I've been able to take in any weight out of this area here, so we're still on track for keeping a nice sort of solid baseline, which is paramount.
Pauline has asked, what brand are your scissors?
Brand of my scissors. The brand of my scissors are, what are they? Sharpine.
Sharpine.
I have all sorts. I used to be, if you've seen some of the other classes, I was very devoted to Nick scissors, which were my first pair of scissors, and I think probably the first 5 or 6 pairs I ever bought were Nicks. They were very, very popular at the time when I was first getting into hairdressing and buying scissors and building up my quiver of scissors. I have a pouch that has so many scissors in it. Personally now I'm actually working with scissors that allow me to have a little bit more freedom. Generally now with my scissors I'm not getting caught with having my thumb in. So when I first started cutting I used to have a big thumb hole to get my thumb in, and I was cutting very mechanically. Now I find that I'm feeling and a lot more visual with my cutting, so the scissor now for me, I need a bigger, stronger scissor because I do have big hands, big feet, but it allows me to be able to not sort of throw the balance of my scissor out too quickly. So.
Fantastic. Oliver has asked,
Hey Oliver.
when cutting dry like this in the salon, would you wash and dry and straighten yourself, or would you ask them to come in freshly washed, or how they would wash their hair?
Yeah, if I'm in the position to be able to ask them to do that, I think we've all been in the situation, great question, I think we've all been in the situation where clients will say, yes, I'm going to wash my hair before they come in. I really don't know what people tend to do when they do that, because a lot of the time they'll come in and they haven't rinsed the conditioner out properly, or the product they've used is too heavy, and you find yourself having to re-rinse the hair anyway. So in a lot of instances, I would actually wash and dry the hair and prep it myself properly if I'm going to be cutting dry. Obviously today I didn't do that as I explained before, because I wanted to really showcase the dry shampoo product.
Thank you. We also have Brandon watching from Vegas. Hello,
Hey,
Brandon.
Hey, Vegas.
Wish
cool.
we were in Vegas.
That's so cool. I love it. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to now be just sort of picking up and doing a little bit of a disconnect layer into this base. Now this just allows us, when you're carrying longer lengths, still to be able just to get a little bit of fullness into the internal part of the layer. So when people, you tend to find are flipping the hair around, they generally like to get in and just give themselves a little massage just to aerate the internal part of the hair, so it's not just hanging too heavily. So I do this in two sections. So what I'll basically do here is I'm going to be running around the crest line, and I'm going to take a section, and it's a little bit of a brick format. So the section will be about 1 centimetre thick, or 1/8 of an inch. That one's for you, Brandon, in Vegas. Assuming you guys work in that system. Pinch the hair and divide this. So I've taken one section which is going from the back of the ear to the centre of the crown. I'm going to knock that section into two. Separate that away. Now this can work two ways. Once again, I'm still going to do a slide technique. I think we've all been in salon where we've seen people twist hair and then actually work through down the layer. I'm actually going to keep this quite traditional and actually slide through this. This is not a matter of actually picking up that entire section and sliding straight through. I'm going to slide through quite randomly in that entire panel. So it's not creating the perfect layer, it's creating an element of disconnected layer that's just going to fall in the body of the hair. Once again, we've got to be quite mindful that we're not taking too much up and gutting this baseline section. When I'm actually cutting this section, I will be coming in behind my fingers as opposed to in front of my fingers. Again, take the second section. So many clips. I'm not a big clip person generally. I'm using a lot today.
They're normally just on your arm.
And they're normally just on my arm, so they look like a hairdresser.
Or for show.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to wear them around my watch. That was just getting too much because I was wearing too many clips. Couldn't bend my wrist. So the way I actually approach doing this particular technique or this particular layering process, so I look at the actual overall length of the hair and I'll hit from just past halfway. So I'm not taking too much out from a weight perspective, but I am actually aerating the baseline a little bit more. If you go too deep, what you end up doing is creating such a short section inside, which what you'll tend to find is that the client will still feel like there's a lot of bulk in the hair. So key thing just to be mindful of when you are cutting dry, whenever you are doing techniques like this, you do have cut hair that does fall into the remaining lengths, which when you go combing through section to section, you will get a little bit of bite, or grab a little bit, or knot a little bit. Just be mindful of that. Explain to the client before you start that there will be a little bit of that grabbiness. Is grabbiness a word?
Definitely not.
Grabbiness. I encourage all of you to use it once in your next haircut with your clients. Grabbiness. Now, key thing is, and if we can just switch around a little bit on our camera angle, we can see that we're still maintaining good length, nice solidarity through this baseline. So if we now drop this crown section over, hopefully I'm not too marked for my clips. It allows us to have created all the layering through the back half of this haircut, and we've still got movement. So the shortest layer at the moment is sitting in here.
That was from our original point.
The very first section. In the same instance as we comb that down, and once we turn the cape around, we'll be able to clearly see what we need to take off that baseline or off our perimeter line.
Awesome. We have a question from Dunk.
Hey Dunk.
How do you hold your body position when doing this technique? Straight behind the section?
It depends really on the section that I'm working with. So, as I said before, a key thing about this is keeping yourself mobile. If you're somebody that isn't traditionally mobile when it comes to that, the key thing then is to actually turn the chair and so forth. So, key part of this for me is making sure that I'm firmly planted and open to move. So, yeah, try not to be too stationary. I know that's your technique.
Oh, well, now you're going that way.
We're getting each other here. So at this point in time now, what we're actually going to do is connect in and do our face framing. So for this, I actually will turn Nina around. Because it's a beautiful sunny day here today, we are dealing with a tremendous amount of glare.
The problems of living in the Sunshine State.
Yeah, it is today.
Where is it? Here?
Yeah, that's a bit better. Thank you. We're going to cut from the front here, so.
So, if you can see behind us, we've got my beautiful white Laura, who's been
a bit of a blocker, guys. My own personal wind blocker.
So when we actually work with this section here, I'm going to follow roughly on the hairline, so it'll be sort of very much like a 45. And we have some existing layers that are floating through. Key part when you're bringing face framing layers in is we need to work out where our starting point is going to be. So as to whether or not we're going to fall corner of the mouth, below the chin line, cheekbone, and so forth. We will carry this a little bit longer because of the overall length that we've got. If we get too overzealous and come too high with our starting point, what will end up happening is we'll take too much out of the front panels of our shape. So once again, this is going to be a sliding technique. What will always happen here too, particularly with this front section, is you're going to have a thin piece which will be right on your recession point. So you do need to be mindful how you work through this. I'm going to be working this on a 45. If we come out a little bit more on horizontal, what can tend to happen there is we can end up scooping out too much and taking too much hair away from around the face area. So the key point here is I want to drop this in below the chin line. I don't want this to be too perfect in relation to sort of, aka Jennifer Aniston Friends days. I want this to be a little bit more broken up, a little bit more natural.
Do you think, Craig, that it makes a difference when you're slicing and torquing the scissors, the speed your hand is moving?
Yeah. Yeah, very much so.
So the lovely Jessie has a question from us, and I believe she's in New Zealand.
Hey, Jess.
What difference does the angle sorry, let me start that again, everybody. What difference does the angle make when framing the face?
It can vary depending on how much you take away from the front section, so you can really take out a lot scooping wise. So in this case here, I'm actually going to be working a lot more with the fall of the hair. So if you come out and we project out too far, depending on the length, because we're maintaining as much length as possible, I'm actually working this a little bit more on 45. If we're dealing with a shorter length and we wanted the shape around the face to be a little bit stronger and the face framing to be a little bit stronger, I'd actually project this out a little bit more horizontally.
Any tips for framing the face when it comes to fineness, fine hair?
Less is more, smaller sections. Yeah.
Slower talking.
Slower talking, less talking. Alright. One side down. So what we may do just to come through, because you'll always have a little bit, and you can tend to get little sort of like blunt points. So I'll actually come back up and chip into those, just to soften any of those lines out. And that just allows us to have a really nice full of layer.
Dunk again. Do you ever have your client stand to work around the front sections?
Can you? Yes, you can. In this situation, I tend to find I like to be a little bit more in control and on a little bit more eye line or eye level with the sections that I'm working with. If they're standing, I find myself in a little bit more of an unnatural position. So I think a lot of the time when we find ourselves in quite unnatural positions, we can tend to get a little bit, we can tend to lose a little bit more hair and bulk when we don't need to or want to.
So you're kneeling there. Would you normally kneel or would you normally sit on a stool?
Yeah, you can sit on a stool if you wish. I sometimes, once again, find that once I'm on a stool, I'm then projected at a particular height. In this case here, I need to adapt to sort of the work that we're doing. Can you? Yes, you can. If I was to sit on a stool now, the only thing that I'd be a little concerned about, particularly working in front of me, it's a little bit of a funny situation to put yourself in. So for me, I tend to like to work from the side a little bit more. I'm not so much encroaching on Nina's personal space, even though I'm working within this area, keeps her comfortable as well. Yeah. So we're just repeating what we've done on the other side. Small sections, working on a 45. And I'll coat that whole side coming down and just see if there's any other little areas that I need to incorporate in.
I know I find this, Craig, but do you find that one side is always better than the other when you face frame?
Oh, 100%.
One side sits amazing.
Yeah. And I think that works to the side that's your stronger side to work on, which we can probably clearly see is this side. If I let go of my comb. So, key thing that I'll do here now is I'll just bring this fringe area for, just to make sure that we're in the same area. How much variation there is. So what I've pretty much got here is actually almost pretty much true fringe area, or for our stateside people, bangs. Lived and worked in the States for a little while, so very familiar with the term bang.
The lingo.
The lingo. I have to admit though too, I've actually found probably in the last 18 months to 2 years, and whether or not it's because of social media, having a lot more of my younger clientele refer to their fringe as bangs. So whether or not they're watching that videos on YouTube and so forth, but they'll commonly refer to the fringe area as bangs. I'm wondering if you guys hear the same thing.
Definitely from my 10-year-old daughter.
Same with my 10-year-old daughter. Okay. What we're going to do now is we're going to stand Nina up. So I'm just going to cross the mirror. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cut the baseline. And because we haven't done the cape up too tight, we should be able to play spinny spinny.
What would you got?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spin the cape around.
Magic touch.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, perfect. We can go on to that. Now, for this one here, I'm going to step into my serrated blades. Smaller actual physical blade. These ones are actually 5s.
As in 5 inches?
Yeah. Small scissors. Here, Duncan, as you can see, I am, if you're still there, I'm now on the stool.
And tell us why that is.
To look after my back and put me at good eye line as to where and what I'm actually about to do. So if we actually just, once again, Nina, if I can get you just to slightly hang on to those 2 corners there. This gives me a perfect vision as to what we're actually going to be doing from our baseline.
Can I just say, everybody who's watching, how amazing. What did we prep this hair with?
We
right?
prep this with weekend hair, the dry shampoo.
Yeah, and look how shiny and beautiful
Gorgeous.
and lush it
Absolutely
looks.
Amazing. I don't want to wreck that little stand. This whole range, the new range in here, the Heat Hero Humidity Blocker. Humidity Blocker is also to become a massive favourite in salon. Does have that element of spray component which allows us to be able to finish and work with. So once again, fabulous range. Good job, Joko. Here I'm just going to be cutting the baseline through the comb, or we can go freehand for those of you that are brave. What we'll then be doing is actually connecting into the side parts of the base of our face framing. And we can pretty much see when we comb this down exactly where we're going, so it's really a matter of sort of joining the dots. If you're concerned about doing that, you can actually take the section straight across and then look to work through by sliding down. I'm not using a slide scissor, so that's something I won't do. There's our baseline. So the key part about this is that we've been able to retain good length and weight into the perimeter line, so it keeps us nice and solid. We're not looking to see through. We've not overlaid, so we're actually having to bring that baseline or perimeter line up too high. So in Nina's case here, her requirement was, it was actually really more a threat, was not to cut too much hair off. So we've been able to do that and achieve everything we need to do, and I actually think I'm secretly undoing the bra. So yeah, so what we'll do is we're going to sit Nina back down. I'm just going to do a quick recap on what we've done and how we've worked through this, and yeah, then we've got something a little special to show you guys once we finish that. Alright, so we'll pull the chair back out. This Nina. You in?
We'll just turn that around.
Yeah, no, keep the cape. can be a superhero for the next little bit. So as Em said, the hair's got beautiful shine. It's been very manageable, very easy to work with. So to start off with, or to recap, we separated out the front two sections for our face framing so we didn't take too much weight out of the sides and beyond the shoulders. We then separated out the crown area. That was our first point and our first guide. With that, we actually worked into a position where we went into an increased layer. I did work from one side so I could actually continue the movement quite comfortably. Once we'd finished that section, we started with an inch thick section and we worked off each side, bringing back up to a stationary guideline. Once we worked through that section, we took a little panel through the middle just to give us a little bit of a freehand slide layer, which allows us to be able to get in and give the hair a little bit of lift and a little bit of aeration through the layers. Very important. So if you're popping a curl through and things like that, you don't have a really hard point where each layer sits. It's very seamless, or it melts. Melt is a big word that we use in the shop when we're describing colour, when we're describing curl and texture and so forth. So yeah. Once we did that, we then worked into the face area. We worked on a 45, bringing it forward, and then actually, once again, freehanding and actually slide cutting through that area. And then we worked on our perimeter line. So as we can see, very seamless in our end result. Once again, you can't see where any layer starts and or finishes. Hopefully the video quality is good enough to be able to show that. But the shortest layer at the moment sits right there, which worn straight and smooth like this, you wouldn't see where that starts and finishes. Alright, so this is our haircut. Now what we're going to do is a little bit of a treat. We're going to get Nina set up and moved in front of the banner, which will relocate. I'm going to take control of the camera. We have a lot of people messaging us and wanting to see the shop and see how it looks and so forth, so we may need to remove some of our dampeners. So I'm going to take over, and then Em is going to, well, hopefully this looks all right. I don't know how this looks.
Do you want me to turn it around?
Turn it around? All right. Okay, cool. All right, so we're going to get a few things out of the way, and we're going to give you a tour of the shop. So the guys are just very quickly moving all of the things out of the way that they're not meant to. So I have two parts to my shop. I literally have the front part of the salon, which we commonly refer to as the fishbowl. I'm actually just going to move past these guys, and I can show you the front while they do this, and you won't see them. Okay, yeah, my wife's wearing a short dress today, so she's a bit worried. She's standing on a stool. So, okay, the front part of my shop. I might just spin this around again. Okay, so we have our front desk area. We have beautiful views down to the river here in Noosa. So we have our front reception area. We then move on to our main cutting floor. So the main part of this is four stations, which are completely visual to the street area. We have a little bench seat waiting area. We've put in a curved wall. Part of that was to break up a little bit of the rectangular shape of the shop. Also too, what that does do is gives us a little bit of a point of difference, visual interest from the street. We do have lots of sheer curtains throughout the shop. This just helps break the light, soften it down, add an element of privacy. Like a lot of shops, we have a lot of glass, and we can tend to be a bit like a fishbowl. Twofold to the actual curved wall, and it is at the moment, we've got a lot of things shoved out here, but we have created another little room out the back. I might have to stand back for this. So we have a whole another little room here, which is our tanning area. So we have a full tanning booth out here, private area. We have a separate standalone seating area. We have our makeup mirror, where Lara does a lot of makeup. We do a lot of editorial shoots and so forth. So Then we move through to the second part of the shop. We have our retail section, which as you can clearly see is full of lots of Joico, more Joico, Keymon, all the famous brands sold by Sabre, which is fabulous, and a bit of fudge, Hans, don't forget about Hans, beautiful range. I do have my little back messy room with heaps of Joico colour, Lumi Shine, intensities. I won't go into that too much more because it's a little bit like every back room. We then move through into our back private area, and so we have our basins, once again stocked beautifully with heaps of Joico in the background. We've created an interesting space or an interesting way to separate the room here by dropping in a rope feature. Provides a divide between the basin area and our back salon area where we actually do clients out here that want to come and be a little bit more private to the street. We also have a colour processing table or a working table, which allows people to come in with their computers and sit down while their colours are processing and develop and so forth. We have people that do Zoom meetings here and so forth, so they can come in during the course of the day. Also too, this is all completely curtained off to give an element of privacy. So it's almost like a little bit of a hidden part of the shop. We also have my beautiful little dog, little mascot. This is Cliff. Hey, Cliff. Cliff comes into the shop nearly every day. So, all right, and if we can just pop Nina in front of a slightly different vibe to the back of the shop as well. So, yeah, so we're just going to go into now working through what we've got to do for the rest of this. So we're just going to wrap this up. So this is Nina. If we can get you to turn, Nina, so we can just see your hair. Feel free to get your hands into it, have a play. Yeah, cool. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed what we've done today. Like I said, long layers are a haircut that we do a lot of in the shop, so it's very important that we get comfortable with techniques. We need to be able to evolve and translate those techniques. So really what we do as we get into our hairdressing careers, we build up a bag of tricks, learning different techniques to apply to different hair textures, different lengths, and different day-to-day wants from the client, which is paramount. So yeah, Nina's very active, she's outdoors a lot, has a boat that she spends a lot of time on as well. So to wrap it up, hopefully you've enjoyed everything. What's next? Sorry, I've got to read this out because there's a lot of information here. Our next Facebook Live is next Wednesday, the 28th of April. It's a very Vero class. Creative Control with Verochrome, Demi-Permanent Colour and Vero Glaze. 1 p.m. for New South Wales and Queensland, 11 a.m. from WA and 3 p.m. for New Zealand. That's my audition for reading weather. So if this doesn't work, I'm going to be a weatherman. All right, guys, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Ciao.